Hello there. Welcome to the David Mammano Show. I am David Mammano, and I really want to thank everybody for watching, listening, and just experiencing the podcast. Today I have in the show a very, very special guest. His name is Ari Weinzweig. Ari, welcome back to my show. You did my first podcast in 2016, and all these years later, you're back. So welcome, Ari.
Here I am. We're still going.
We're still going strong. Still going strong.
Honored to be back.
Ari is probably, he won't admit it because he's very modest, but probably like the coolest dude guest on my podcast ever, and ever has been and ever will be. And I'll tell you why. If anybody knows anything about Ann Arbor, Michigan, you certainly have heard of Zingermans. And Zingermans is arguably, I'll say not arguably, is that the word? I don't think anybody would argue about it, like the best deli in the world. That's my opinion, and it's a fact. Even, didn't Oprah name you guys the best deli in the country, right, back in the day?
You gave the sandwich like an 11 out of 10 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then this is years ago when people still read print magazines. I miss print magazines, but Ink magazine put you guys on the cover as far as the coolest small business in America, right?
That's what they said.
Yeah. So Ari, I'm going to give everybody a little overview of who you are and what you do because it's so damn interesting, and then we're going to get into it. So
you got it. I'm going to sit here while you do that.
I love it. You have a sip of your water, whatever you're drinking there. Some tea?
Yeah,
I know you like your tea, right?
Water, and orange juice.
Yeah, very good. Well, you let me know if you need a bathroom break, okay? So here's a brief overview, because if I told you everything Ari's done, we'd be here for a whole hour. But way back in 1982, Ari Weinzweig, along with his partner, Paul Saginaw, who I've met as well, Paul's the coolest guy as well, they founded Zingermans Delicatessen with a $20,000 bank loan. And Ari had very extensive experience in the restaurant industry and in college with his, I say that tongue in cheek, with his degree in Russian history.
Well,
let's open up a deli.
I worked in restaurants for 4 years before we opened.
Right. Yeah. So you did have some experience, but
not less extensive than it is now all these years later. But it's not I just went from reading books to opening.
And you're still reading books, right? So, so your Russian history degree definitely prepared you for this incredible restaurant. You have 4 years washing dishes, cooking, cleaning. You started with 2 employees, right, in a small selection of specialty foods and really great sandwiches. Now, we're going to go to today where you have expanded. We're going to get into that story, but you've expanded into multiple businesses. 11 businesses currently, is it, in the Ann Arbor area?
Depends how you count.
Give or
10,
take?
12.
Between 10 and 12. And now from the 2 employees, you have 750 plus employees, over $65 million in revenue. And some of the businesses are, you have a bakehouse, you have a coffee shop, you have a candy company, creamery, a roadhouse grill, you have a mail order company, you have a training company, you open up a farm, food tours, and we'll talk more about that. But it's just, and I love the story about how that happened, which we're going to get into. You're also a writer. You read a lot. You write a lot. How many books have you written?
That depends how you count too, but let's say books and pamphlets together, about 15.
15, yeah. And I've read most of your books, and they're super fantastic. And then you travel a lot too. You do a lot of speaking around the country, if not the world, with your training company called Zing Train to talk about the way you do business. So that's super awesome. And in 2007, which seems like yesterday to me, but it's unbelievable that it's
almost 20 years
how many years, but it's a long time ago, that you and Paul were presented with a Lifetime Achievement Award from Bon Appetit magazine for your work in the food industry. And this is kind of cool. You're also awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award for the American Cheese Society in 2014. How about that, right? Last but not least, you're a voracious reader. You love reading books. And the bio that I read online is like you're trying to find another room just to fit your books. Is that is that fair to say?
I'm not really trying, but I need
But
more
you need
room.
it.
But yeah,
Yep.
my,
And
my significant other is a little frustrated at times for good reason. But what are you going to do?
right. Well,
There's a lot to learn.
there's worse habits to have, Ari. Right. So that's awesome.
Couldn't agree more.
And you are a self-proclaimed anarchist, and you're finding yourself to be the owner of the largest collection of anarchist books in Ann Arbor, outside of the Labadie collection at University of Michigan Library. So you have a lot of. We'll talk about that.
That's not
too,
saying that much, probably, but the Labadie collection is awesome. It's probably the biggest collection in the country, which is where I used to go study, and have since gone back to study again.
Yeah. So, but all right, I want to go back. So I met you. I can't remember the year, but it was when Bo Burlington wrote Small Giants.
Yeah,
Bo Burlington.
Yeah. Ham.
Oh, did I say Burlington? I'm talking about Burlington, Vermont before. Burlingham, yes.
Yeah, no worries.
Sorry, Bo. Love you, Bo. So Bo wrote Small Giants. I think it was like 2006 or 7, something like that. And I read it cover to cover. It was so amazing. And he profiled business people that had thriving businesses, but chose to, instead of just like go really big, franchise, expand for expansion's sake, decided to stick with the core culture and the core roots and the core DNA of their company, and not wanting to lose that by growing bigger. And you were profiled in the book, and I got so excited. I called you. You took my call. You said, "Come to Ann Arbor, have a sandwich on me, let's meet." And I did. And I took some of your classes at Zing Train at the time, and I fell in love with Ann Arbor and fell in love with Zingermans, and of course you. And I've been back many, many times. And then Bo was so enamored with the fact that I called a lot of people in the book. That's how I met Norm Brodsky and some of the other people there too. Jay Goltz, Jay, and I just called. I liked whoever I liked in the book. I called, and everyone was like, "Yeah, come see me." And but then when a group of us got together and to start Small Giants. And that was the Small Giants community was started in your training room at the time, right? And Small Giants community goes on today. So I'm sorry, I've done a lot of talking. Ari, I want to go back for everybody that doesn't know your story, because I just love it. And I want to go back to you and Paul started Zingermans. It was doing well, right? You and Paul, I believe, if I remember the story correctly, kind of sitting on a bench outside the deli. Paul said, "Let's expand." And there was a talk of maybe Subway, maybe franchising. And you were like, "No way." So I want everybody to hear that story, because I think it's so great about such a pivotal move for your company.
Okay, let's back up. So, we started in 1982. So in the first of the leadership book series that I've done, there's an essay called 12 Natural Laws of Business, which are essentially like gravity for organizations. Doesn't matter if they're for-profit or not for-profit, and really for people. And the first one on the list is that all organizations that are getting to greatness, which doesn't mean the biggest, it just means doing what you want and living the life you want to lead, have a vision. Now, they may not write it down the way we do now and the way Bo wrote about in Small Giants, but they have one in their head. It's a natural human process that we imagine this better future. And Paul and I didn't know you could write it down in 1982, so we didn't, but we had one in our heads. If I were giving you the bullet points now, and a lot of this is written in the pamphlet, The Story of Visioning at Zingermans. But if I were to write it now, it would have said from the beginning, we knew we wanted something really unique and special. That's always what we've been drawn to, is not the copies, but the places that are really something else on their own. Great food, great service, great place for people to work. Do it in a very down-to-earth setting, which doesn't seem that radical in whatever year we're in now. But at the time, to get really amazing food, mostly you had to get kind of dressed up. And we didn't want to have people do that. And from the beginning, we knew we only wanted one. That was very clear from the get-go. I've always been drawn to the places that 20 years later, you still remember what it was like. And no disrespect to those who open multiple units, but I've never gone to the 10th unit and where it was like unbelievable. It's more convenient. It's good for your finances. The people who live nearby like it, but it's never got the same energy as the original, which, it's not value judgment. It's just, if businesses are art, that's not the art I wanted. Anyway, we expanded a couple times. Like you said, the original space was 1,300 square feet. So the story is summer day, so the opposite time of year of right now, about 10 in the morning when I should have been inside getting the sandwich line ready for the lunch rush. By this point, we had, 100 and some employees, and, we're doing $5 million in sales, and we'd been written up in a lot of famous magazines, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, Paul sat me down, and he kind of looked at me, and he goes, okay, in 10 years, what are we doing? And I was like, what? And he's like, in 10 years, what are we doing? I'm like, I don't know what we're doing in 10 years. He's like, well, I mean, is this, are we still here? Like, we've turned down offers to open in other cities because we're only opening one. We won't open another youth spot on campus, even though people want it, because we're only having one. What are we doing in 10 years? I'm like, dude, I don't know. I got work to do. And he's like, no, this is our work. So in hindsight, what he was asking is, what's your vision in our current language? In hindsight, I would say he had a very good intuitive sense that we had reached what I would now equate to organizational midlife, or what John O'Donohue, the Irish philosopher, would call a threshold, where you sort of finish something that was very challenging, that you cared about deeply, and then you got there, but then you realize you're not done. You're just at the beginning of the next thing. And I don't think he had a vision. I know I didn't have a vision. It's not like we were satisfied, because we've always been about continuous improvement long before there was a Toyota way. But there's a big difference I've come to understand between improving what you have and going after an aspirational, inspirational vision of the future. So it's not like he had one. He just was saying we need a new one, in essence. And so that question prompted a year of long walks and frustrating conversations and eye rolls, and, but continually, as we've always done, come back to the table over and over till we can figure it out. And that's still what we all do today. And during that, early in that year, we met, got to know a guy named Stash Kazmierski, whose office was just up the block. He was part of a consulting firm called Dana Miller Tyson that was started by a woman named Kathy Dana Miller, who was known all over for her progressive organizational change methodology. And I don't have an office, but they did. And anybody who's listening who works in an office knows that, part of your job is to get out of the office as much as you can. And they would all walk down the block to the deli to get coffee or have meetings, or, on a nice day, sit outside at the picnic tables, whatever. So that's how we got to know Stash. And when I don't remember which of us shared this problem that we were had been confronted with, but he shared what we now call visioning. And he had learned this process from a guy named Ron Lippitt, who had developed it originally at Institute of Social Research at University of Michigan in the late 50s, 60s, and 70s. He originally did the work really more around nonprofits and communities. He had taught it to a number of people. Stash was one of them. Stash taught it to us. We adapted it, as Stash always taught us to do: adapt, not adopt. So make it your own. And we morphed it a bit, but the core of it came from Ron Lippitt. And then using that process, we changed the name to Visioning. It was just what we started to call it. And that stuck. And that we wrote a vision. And after about a year of long, frustrating conversations, we finally arrived at a vision that we called Zingermans 2009. So if you're quick at math, you realize we went 15 years in the future, not 10. And that vision was about 6 pages long, or still is about 6 pages long. And it described that when we hit 2009, we would have created a community of businesses, all located here in the Ann Arbor area. I have a strong belief about doing business where you live, where each business would be a Zingermans business, so we could grow and provide opportunity, but where each would have its own unique specialty, so we could stay true to the original vision of only having the one deli, and where each business would have a managing partner or partners in it, because our experience was the further you got from the owner, generally, not always, but generally, the less energy was present in the place, and we didn't like that, and we really wanted people who were passionate about what they were doing, and that we would use this vision to create synergy, which sounds like a fancy 70s buzzword, but actually comes from the anthropological research of Ruth Benedict in the 1930s, who studied Native American tribes and found essentially that, yes, Darwin's correct, survival of the fittest is true, but the fittest are not the most violent. The fittest are the most collaborative and the most generous. And so synergy literally meant and means, if I help you, I'm helping myself, whether I meant to or not. And if I help myself, I'm helping you, whether I meant to or not. So the idea wasn't just me and Paul investing in different businesses. It was to operate as one organization from the get-go, where each component was contributing positively to the others. So that's what happened.
That's fantastic. I mean, what a story. And I think the part that I love about it the most is, like, yes, we'll expand, but we're going to stay in Ann Arbor, right? Where, your energy will continue to be vibrated throughout the organization. And we don't want to think about it, but, when you and Paul, step aside somehow, some way, someday, I feel strongly that, the Zingermans DNA is going to continue, right? I think you guys have really kind of instilled it in everybody that works there. And you feel like everybody's, I got to feel the vibe. But you truly feel a vibe when you enter one of your businesses that is like, it's magical almost, right? I mean, it's just like, I know I'm
That's
at
what
Zingermans.
a woman said to me last night at the Roadhouse. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're a Zingerman. You're like, it's something different, And it's stemming from not only, the great food and great products, but just the people. The people have a certain, it's like what's the word that Bo uses when you're grown in the soil?
He calls it mojo.
Yeah, well, mojo, yeah. But then he also talks about how
energy. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but like you can grow some vineyards, you grow some grapes in a certain soil.
I call it I told him that.
Yeah. Say that again.
It's the impact of the soil on the grapes, on the plants that are growing in it, and how the soil content will alter, not necessarily for better or for worse, but it will impact the flavor of what grows in it. And that's my belief about a community. That's not the only thing that resonates in that energy, but it's certainly a factor.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something in your soil, right? And if anybody has, it had not been at Ann Arbor, I mean, just go for the Zingermans experience. And that's what you guys call it, right? The Zingermans experience. And go take one of the classes. Look up Zing Train. They always have great classes, and even just go and of course visit the deli and have one of their just world famous class sandwiches, submarines, whatever you call them, right?
Yeah.
And it's so great. Every time I go there, it's a beautiful experience for.
Well, you're due to come back, but
I haven't been there in a while.
In terms of the long term, I don't know if you want to get into it, but so we put a perpetual purpose trust in place a few years ago. So that's a big piece of it.
Oh, tell us about that. How's that work?
Well, I mean, in a good way, we're getting older. It doesn't bother me. There's only two choices. I like this one. Again, Paul's the one who really brought up the succession work. I mean, when we opened, I was 25. It was the least of my worries. I didn't think I'd live long enough to be worried about succession. Bo also wrote a book about that called Finish Big. And anyway, but so, it's not that easy a thing. I mean, if a lot of people leave it to their kids, which we weren't going to do. A lot of people sell it, which we didn't really want to do. We have managing partners in each business. So, I mean, our organizational construct from a legal standpoint is very complex. So anyway, long story short, 15 years later, a couple things I'll share. So I started to look at succession, just to get my mind around what it really meant in three broad categories. So one is cultural succession, which is kind of what you just described, which is that the culture keeps going. Mm-hmm. The second one is governance succession. So how will decisions be made? And I would say the typical small business is still, I'm not saying this judgmentally, but run like a monarchy or in extreme cases, dictatorship, which we use negatively around countries, but it's still what's done in a lot of businesses, and it's often a benevolent monarchy, but it's still, not in a bad way. It's how Paul and I started too. I mean, the owners make the decisions. Like, it's not that's strange. But we here have been governing our organization by consensus of what we call our partners group for 30 years, a little over 30 years. It's all the managing partners, plus me and Paul. And then as of 10 years ago, we added 3 and then later 4 staff partners, we call it, which we could get into. But anyway, so that for us, we've had this governance in place for a really long time, and imperfect though it always is, it works. So we had cultural and we had governance, but what we didn't have clear was the legal and financial succession, like who would own the shares, which is, the question Paul threw at me out of the blue all those years ago. And anyway, long story short, again, what we ended up doing is creating what's called a perpetual purpose trust. I'm not a lawyer, so you can find somebody, I can get you people to interview who are far more well-versed in the logistical details of it. But essentially, there's about 45 or 50 of them in the country. I think there'll be a lot more in the long run. From a layperson like me standpoint, it's basically what I would say is me and Paul gifting the intellectual property to itself so that it can never be sold. And more and more of the ownership in it will pass to, we have about 275 staff members who own a share in our organization right now. So more and more of the ownership will pass to them. But the key is it can't be sold, so that instead of, what I would say metaphorically, like, Ari and Paul plant this forest in 1982. They grow the forest. They get older. They clear cut the forest, take the money, and move to wherever. Not Buffalo or Rochester, but somewhere warmer. But in this case, it's really more the idea of creating an old growth forest so that the forest stays long after we're gone. And that's really what we've created. So that's a big piece of that succession. So yes, hopefully the culture stays strong, but this is a way to keep it strong so that 2 years after we're gone, somebody doesn't flip it to, some big company based in Manhattan or Dubai or whatever, and end up undercutting the quality of what we do.
Yeah, that would kind of be the exact opposite of what you would want. Going back to that original talk with Paul.
Story. It's a very common story, and it's not done out of malice. People want to exit, like Bo wrote about in his book, but they end up selling it. The only people that can generally afford it are very big companies that have a lot of cash, because most of us in small businesses, and we're bigger than small now, but we're still small by the world standards, have value on paper, but they're not sitting on $100 million with nothing to do with it. So you need some giant company that can come in and pay a lot for, what you want to exit. But in this case, it's we get our salary for a number of years, so we're not exiting in poverty, hopefully, but it allows the organization to stay with the essentially the decision-making power and the profit stay in the business and in the community, and not get sent off halfway around the world.
Yeah, that's great that you planned it out so much. It seems like you and Paul are just great business partners. And I'm not saying there's never been an argument, but it seems like you have.
No, there's been plenty. Yeah.
Yes. But it seems like
part of what makes it good. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Any relationship, if it's real, there's going to be some ups and downs, right? But, you guys have been partners for how long now? Well, since 1982.
43 years, and a month from today, or a month from this week, will be 43 years.
Yeah, and that's something. But it seems like you guys both bring different things to the table and really make it work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, all relationships are challenging. All relationships start good with good intentions, but it's hard to keep it going. And so, I don't know exactly what makes it work, but shared vision is huge. Shared values is huge. Shared belief. I wrote a giant book on beliefs. That can also be problematic or an upside. Luck doesn't hurt. I think that we didn't really know it or discuss it overtly, but we had reasonably close financial aspirations, because that can often send people sideways. And then now, that we know about divisioning, which you asked about earlier, that's huge because there's no right answer. I mean, some people want to start a business so they can flip it in 5 years and leave and never have to work again. And then neither of us wanted that, which was super helpful, but it wouldn't have been that weird that one of us thought that was obvious and we never really brought it up. So, I mean, I think all of those things come together. Paul has a little saying that's helped me a lot, which is learning to disagree without being disagreeable. And then there's just all the techniques that make any relationship work, or when we do them poorly, which we've all done them poorly at various times, then it doesn't work that great. And then, the ability to recover from failure. But I mean, I think it's obvious in nature that the healthiest ecosystems are just the most diverse. And so Paul and I being very different while still sharing values and vision was super helpful. And the fact that, there's things that he freaks out about that I don't even notice and vice versa, so.
Well, it's a case for a good partnership. When partnerships work well, the yin and the yang are tremendous. And you guys are showing that where, as you just said, you have, a lot of parts of your personalities are very different, but where the circles overlap is the shared vision, right? And then you that's what you guys focus on and grow from there, right?
Some of it is just personal. Like I'm an introvert, he's an extrovert. I mean, it's not values. It's just learning to allow the other person to be themselves. But yeah, I mean, I think all of that comes into play without question.
I find it interesting that you say you're an introvert, and I get that. But you've kind of become the face of the company with the speaking and the training.
Well, introverts can learn to be in public. It just means that you like your time alone.
You need some time to recharge. That's why you read.
Oh yeah, I have plenty. After I'm done here, I'm going to go for my daily run for an hour and change. And I always, so it's not good or bad. I mean, it's just, some people like red wine, some people like white wine. I mean, but if you try to impose your worldview on the other people, it doesn't go that great.
Right.
But remember now too, it's not just me and Paul. I mean, we have managing partners. So, I mean, I was just in a meeting with 3 of them this morning. One's been here 30 years. One's been here 33 years. One's been here 22 years. So it's not just the 2 of us. It's a lot of people working together.
Yep. So I want to bring something up, and it's interesting in today's world. You've always called yourself an anarchist. Right. And I think if people think of anarchy in the traditional sense, it's like, oh, my God, does Ari want to throw over the government? But tell us about why you say that you're a lifelong anarchist.
That's not the traditional sense. That's the inaccurate understanding of it.
Right. So clarify that for us.
Well, it's a little bit like if people say Christianity is all about killing because of the Crusades.
Right.
It's not accurate. It was one point in history. Did some people do that? Yes. Does it invalidate all of the rest of the people who care deeply about human beings and value their religion? No, not at all. So anarchism, obviously, there's 1,000 different definitions of anything, and certainly anarchism, I'm the last one to declare. Nobody can declare that this is what it really is. I could only say what it means to me. But I studied it in school. I was drawn to it for any number of reasons. When I started working as a dishwasher and then a line cook and managing kitchens, when I started managing kitchens, I sort of tried leaving everybody alone in what I would now say was well-intended but naive belief they would just do the right thing of their own volition. That didn't work. So for years, I would say I was a lapsed anarchist as I started to read Peter Drucker and Max Dupree and all those other people. And that's sort of where it stayed for many years. And then fast forwarding, I don't know, 2007 or something, when I was working on part 1 of the leadership series, which is building a great business, I got asked to speak at the Jewish Studies Department by Deborah Dash Moore, who's still a customer and was the head of the department. And she knew I had studied anarchism, and I had just written this long essay on Jewish rye bread, the history of Jewish rye bread. And so she goes, oh, I'm going to call it Anarchism on Rye or something like that. And I was like, oh, that's cute. as is not uncommon in academic settings. She asked me like in January for the following fall. So I was like, sure, whatever, like we'll deal with it when I get. And then, when I got to like 3 months out though, I was like, well, at business conferences, to your point of your question, nobody really knows what anarchism is. So they just chuckle anxiously and then we move on. But I was like, at Jewish studies, they actually know all these people, and they, I'm going to look like an idiot because I haven't looked at my books in 30 years. And so I got all my old books out and I started to restudy, and it blew my mind for two main reasons. A lot of what we had created was very aligned with anarchist philosophies, even though I hadn't thought about it consciously that way. It's how it played out. And then B, so much of what's now called progressive business was very aligned with anarchist thinking 100 and whatever years ago. It's just now Jim Collins goes on the bestseller list and Emma Goldman used to go to jail. But, it's all the stuff that, self-organizing work teams, that's anarchism. Employee engagement, that's anarchism. Purpose, that's anarchism. Flatten hierarchies, that's anarchism. So all of these things are aligned with it. And, for me, it's basically a positive belief in human beings. What you described earlier is a commonly held but wholly inaccurate belief, which is that anarchism is chaos. It's actually the opposite of that. It's all about organization. It's just about involving the people in the organization, in the organizing, not imposing it from on high by some mythically brilliant, hierarchically high up person. So in a lot of ways, we've created a lot of that within the organization, and there's quite a bit that's aligned. So anyway, I left it alone for 30 years, and then I fell back into it.
Well, and this leads into some of your books, which I've read. A lapsed anarchist approach to building a great business, right? So was that your first one? Your first big book?
That was the first big business book. Yep.
Right. Yep. And then, being a better leader, managing ourselves, the power in beliefs in business. Mm-hmm. So those are some a great volume of books that you've written, right? I mean, they go deep. Yeah. This is when you started getting a little prolific with your writing.
I think 8 pamphlets. The most recent of which is called A Revolution of Dignity in the 21st Century Workplace. And then I have a little chapbook that just came out a few months ago that's called Life Lessons I Learned from Being a Line Cook.
Oh, nice. Then you also have some books that are very related to food and just the industry. You have guides to giving great service. You have a guide to better bacon.
Yep.
Good
true.
eating. You have a guide on good olive oil, which I read years ago. I got to reread that again.
Yeah, that was a little chapbook. You have to look for that. That's long since out of print. We just made
I got to find that. I had it at one time. I got to dig it up.
Well, it's in your, one of your shelves somewhere in a little pocket.
It definitely is. One of my boxes. You have a book on good vinegar. I love this.
Yeah, that was another one. Yeah.
And then a good book. You have a book on good Parmigiano Reggiano. I mean, talk about
those
books,
are
right?
old. You got the old list from 30 years ago, but there's more recently. There's the Dignity pamphlet. There's the Story of Visioning at Zingermans. There's one that's about our food philosophy. There's one on humility. There's one called Bottom Line Change, which is our organizational change recipe. There's another one that's on the art of business, which is my belief that business and life are like art or music or poetry. There's one on Emma Goldman, who is an anarchist, and it was written for her 150th birthday about how to put her lessons to work. And there's probably one or two more I'm forgetting. But yeah, the other ones are a long time ago. But
out of all the things that you've done, so building the business, the people, the products, the books, what can you say out of all those things, like, what fuels you the most? Like, what just really lines up with your purpose the most?
One of the things that's been super helpful to me from anarchist philosophy is to not try to rank everything. And so I don't think that there's no answer. I mean, I really look at it all as one thing. It's not like they exist in isolation, because it's all part of my life, and just trying to lead a good life that contributes positively to the people around me and that I feel good about at the same time. So I don't really think about, this book or that business. It's all one imperfect entity.
Yeah. No, you just made me think about Robert Frost. He was asked one time to think of what is the meaning of life? Mm-hmm. And his answer was to get so immersed in life that you don't have time to even think about the meaning of life.
Yeah, I like that. That's good.
So that's kind of what you're doing, right? And life well led by you. So I want to go back. I remember the first time I met you, and you were speaking about when you and Paul were talking about expanding, and you said something of the nature that the thought of a Zingermans sandwich, being served in a different city as with just a watered down version of what you envision of the Zingermans experience, like broke your heart. So now fast forward all these years later. With everything that you've done, how do you feel that the version of the vision that you and Paul decided that day? How do you feel about it? Are you pretty proud of it? Do you feel like anything's been watered down, or are you pretty happy with everything that you guys have done?
Well, everything is in tension all the time. We're not a sculpture. It's an ecosystem that's failing and succeeding right now, while I've been here with you for the last half hour, 43 things went wrong and 340 went right. I mean, it's not, it's not like you build this thing and then you walk away and it's finished. I guess I would say, A, yes, I feel good about what we did. B, I've trained myself mostly out of questioning. That's what we did. It doesn't really matter what else we could have done. We didn't. So it's not really worth my energy, what do they call it? Counterfactual, making up some other Zingerman story. But, is more just put all my energy into making what we have better and being appreciative of the people around me and what we're able to do and trying to improve what we got. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. But, it's all compromises. I mean, everything could be made better. We could, make one sandwich a day with 30 people working on it. It would be great. It just, we'd have to charge you $5,000 for the sandwich, so. Well, I mean, that's the reality. Like, we're always compromising, it's just trying to move more and more towards what our definition of quality and trying to get things to work better. But, like I said, I mean, it would be silly to say we don't fall short every 16 seconds. I mean, everybody does.
Well, from the outside in, I would say, like, job well done, right? I mean, I think when you get to the end of your life, which I hope is like many, many years from now,
I'm planning on a lot more, but yeah.
Would you say you are planning? So I hope that was it. But and I hope you just say, like, yeah, we did it, because, from outside in, it's like you were the opposite of a sellout. You guys decided to just, if the word, sell in, just went inward and continued to grow, never sacrificed your principles, your values, your character, the quality of your products, and the compound effect of that, and you kept it, within, like you said, the bubble of being very local, right? And so it's very rare, right? I think a lot of people get to a certain point and, the vision of a boatload of money, if they expand, it's pretty enticing, right? But that wasn't important to you. It was more important to do things your way, which is really admirable.
Well, anybody could do it. It's, I mean, to each their own, but yeah, I mean, I have a lot of friends who sold their businesses and got a lot of money, but then they spend the rest of their life trying to figure out what to do.
Yep. Yeah, I know. So a lot of people get a big bag of money.
It's not a value judgment. It's just, that didn't really seem that appealing. And I like going to work and I like what I'm doing. And every day I'm learning new stuff. And, there's so many challenges to deal with in a good way. And just keep working at it, man.
Yeah. I'm really encouraging everybody to take a trip to Ann Arbor and, take some of the classes, go to Zing Train, and have the sandwiches, right? And also too, if they're not in Ann Arbor, there's things that you offer people that don't, like, tell us more about that.
Well, we go, So, I mean, a couple things I'll say. So the books, we're sort of like farm to table with books. We do all the design. We do it, print them locally. We're, in a good way. We're off of Amazon. We sell directly. It's another big piece of anarchist philosophy is that the means that you use, so how you go about doing something, needs to be congruous with the ends that you want to achieve. So writing books about local small business and selling it on Amazon would be incongruous. Because it's the opposite of local small business. And so I, again, choose to sell less books, but sell it in a way that feels good. So Zingermanspress.com has them, and Zingtrain.com, which you've mentioned, our training business, they're both on there. And then, I speak, like you said, all over. Zingtrain does training all over. Happy to do that. People can email me directly. It's just ari@zingermans.com. I'll answer you. And I do this e-news every week for, the last 7 years. So if they email me, I'll send that back, and they can sign up for that too. And that gives quite a bit of weekly thinking.
Plus you have the catalog, right, where people can order.
Plus we have
products.
mail order. We ship all over. And then if they want to go to Europe, or actually we just did our first tour in Oaxaca, Mexico last week. Or we started one in Korea because we have a little Korean restaurant. Miss Kim, Ji-Hae Kim is the partner in there. She's from Korea. And so her and Christy Brayblack, who's the managing partner at our food tours, they've led 2 of those, I think, so far. So yeah, it's a lot of ways to access us.
Zingtrain, do they offer classes online? I'm trying to remember.
Well, I have a list of about 22 good things that came out of the pandemic. There weren't very many. One of them is that Zingtrain classes went online. So there's a whole series of like 2-hour things. I still think it's far more rewarding to actually come here and do it in person. But that said, of course, not everybody has the money, the time, or the mental capacity to get on a plane or get in the car and come all the way here. So it makes it easy to get a taste of it. I'll just say it's a little, sort of like watching your favorite band on a YouTube video, which we've all done, or going to the concert, and they both have merit, but they're not apples to apples.
The experience is different. Yeah.
It's just, I think it's important. I think the impact of what you described, which is feeling the energetic presence of the staff, seeing it in action, watching what happens when mistakes happen, watching the imperfections and how that's part of what it is, I think is very powerful. And, one way is you sort of get the theory of it from afar, which is not unhelpful, but I think there's a lot of power in like talking to somebody who's working on the counter at the coffee company that didn't prepare that morning to discuss it with you. You're just getting their, honest answers from the heart. And obviously that doesn't happen when you're, doing a 2-hour online session.
Right. Yep. Good to know. All right, Ari, I know you got a cold and you have been bearing with me. Thank you so much. I am going to ask you one more question though.
You can ask whatever you want. I'm good.
That's awesome. Well, and I know you just said you don't like to rank things, but I'm going to ask you to rank something. So,
well, your podcast is the best ever, if that's what you're going to ask.
I wasn't, but thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I know you've done a lot. You walk into your deli and you are only allowed to have one thing for lunch. Mm-hmm. What is that going to be?
Well, I don't really eat lunch. I'm a 1 meal a day person. I only eat dinner.
All right, dinner. You're having dinner. Whatever you eat your meal.
But anyway, I don't generally eat a lot of meat, not out of malice. I just prefer not. But I eat a lot of vegetables and a lot of bread and a lot of olive oil and a lot of cheese. So I'm sort of on what some people might know as the Mediterranean diet, just because it's what I like. Mm-hmm. A baguette and a little cheese and some sort of vegetable or fruit would be awesome.
Sounds good. So
I'm easy. But if I were coming all the way across the country and I'd never been here, I would get a sandwich.
What sandwich?
Well, what I get is the number one still, which is chopped liver and corned beef and Russian dressing. But you could get what you want because it would be your sandwich. So if I had flown to Ann Arbor from, LA, I would not only get a baguette and a little piece of cheese. That's just I'm here every day, so I don't need to rush into anything.
Right. No, I usually get some form of one of your pastrami sandwiches.
Yeah,
which just
and
is like
a fine choice that is.
So good. And then I want to push you a little bit on the bread because you guys do so many different types of bread.
Yeah.
And one of your recipes is like this Jewish bread recipe from 2,000 years ago or something like that, right? So, right? Isn't that true?
The eighth commandment. No, I don't think it's from 2,000 years ago.
The 11th.
Jewish rye bread. Well, we started the bakehouse in 1992, so whatever that is, 33 years. Later, thanks to Frank Carollo, our partner there, and Amy Emberling, the partner now, and now Jason Restrick, also a partner in there. I mean, and the crew, it's quite remarkable. I mean, now it's, again, it started with like 8 people. Amy was one of the first bakers. Now, I don't know how many people worked there, 140 or something like that. But the Jewish rye bread, the history of it comes from probably in Poland, is where that would have originated. So 2,000 years ago, there probably were not Jews in Poland. So it's more like 300 or 400 years ago. It would be probably more realistic, but. It's all the food philosophy pamphlet I share, in depth, our definition of quality here, which we agreed on in 1991 when we wrote our guiding principles. And that would be that we produce or sell full flavored food, and we define that further to mean complexity, balance, and finish. And then secondly is traditional food. So there's exceptions, but we're almost always trying to go back to the old way. Not that modern technology is always bad, but in the 20th century, technology was mostly used to demean the quality of the food in the interest of lower prices, longer shelf life, and more consistency. Not that any of those things are inherently evil, but they were usually done at the expense of flavor. So, in the era that even when I grew up, and certainly now, most Jewish rye bread had barely any rye flour left. It had caraway seeds, which people, just like they confuse anarchism with nihilism and chaos, they confuse rye bread with caraway, which actually has nothing to do with rye. It's two different things. But so this was just going back to longer rise times, much more rye flour in recent years, freshly milled rye flour, et cetera, and just trying to get back closer to, what a really great rye bread might have tasted like in, Eastern Poland in 1800.
Yeah, I've had it, and it's super fantastic. So it's hard to get good bread these days, and that's one of the things you guys do very, very well. So, well, Ari, this has been super, super fantastic. Thanks for being such an influence on my life. And I'm going to say thousands and thousands of other people's lives with everything that you've been doing from providing happy stomachs to business training and everywhere in between. So thank you for doing what you're doing, making a really big impact.
Thank you for doing what you're doing. So and happy to be on here and honored to be on my second time around.
You are a repeat. I appreciate that. And people, once again, if they want to contact you, Ari at Zingermans.com.
Yeah, just Ari at Zingermans.com. I could send them the e-news and then they can sign up is one easy way. And or just come visit. I work the floor at Zingermans Roadhouse pretty much every night for an hour or two just to re-ground in the basics. So you can probably find me there too. Right now I'm at Zing Train. And now I'm going to go run after this.
Beautiful. Thanks, Ari. I wish you continued massive success.
Doing our best, man. Back at you. And thanks to you for the opportunity to share thoughts.
Absolutely. I love it. I also want to thank everybody for watching and or listening to The David Mammano Show. We're coming out with new episodes every Wednesday morning. Truly appreciate your support. If you want to find us on social media and just sign up for my newsletter and all that great stuff, go to davidmammano.com and we'll have tons of stuff for you there as well. So thanks again, Ari. Have a great day, everybody. And make sure to stay awesome.